Hello, and welcome to Titanic Discussions. This is a channel I've been thinking about starting for a long time, and now with everybody inside, I figured this is a great time to get it going, especially for my UK friends. A quick introduction, and I'm going to jump right into it, of what the channel stands for. I have been a Titanic enthusiast my entire life. Since I was about 4 years old when I first learned about it. That's about 45 years ago. And growing up in the 80s and 70s and such, boy, before on-demand video, folks, if you guys who are too young to remember that, when a Titanic movie or a Titanic documentary would come on TV, like A Night to Remember or the 1953 Clifton Webb Titanic, boy, it was really something. You know, if you were into it, you couldn't see it anyplace else. You had to catch it when it was on. It was great. Also, the In Search of episode from 1970, whatever it was, with Leonard Nimoy, always great. So, again, the purpose of this channel is for anyone who really loves a Titanic documentary, whether it's one of those older ones I mentioned or a newer one or a Titanic movie, and just can't get enough discussion or talking about it or learning about it or discovering new things. This channel is for you. And the plan is to have a ton of content, as much as we could possibly get here at the Shack of Knowledge. And another thing I'd like to say is any Titanic discussion is good with me. Even if it's something that's crazy, outlandish, there's nothing so insane or far-fetched or unlikely that I wouldn't at least discuss it if it pertains to the Titanic. You can talk about the possibility of aliens observing the Titanic striking the iceberg and sinking. I'll discuss it with you for a couple hours if you'd like, even hypothetically. And we're going to get into episode 1 right now. And it's an unanswerable question. It's a trick question, but it definitely leads to interesting Titanic discussion, so we're going to get into it. And it is, who is the person most responsible for the sinking of the Titanic? And it's a trick question. It's a trick question because the answer is Captain Smith. So I'm going to rephrase the question for episode 1 is, other than Captain Smith, who is the person most responsible? Now, I feel sorry for Captain Smith, and it's not really anyone's real fault, this tragedy that we all know about so well, but I'm trying to find out whose the most fault it was. And it's cut and dry that it's Captain Smith's. I mean, that's a legal matter. The captain is responsible for what happens to the ship. If he was sleeping below deck because he's off duty and the ship strikes an iceberg, it's Captain Smith's fault because the guy he put in charge while he was sleeping wasn't up to the task. So it's still Captain Smith's fault. So, excluding Captain Smith, who is the person most responsible? And like I said, I feel bad for Captain Smith. He's not really responsible, but as a legal matter, it's cut and dry. So, other than Captain Smith, and I'm going to throw out a couple candidates, folks, and again, it's all opinions. Everyone's opinion counts, and I would never presume to push my opinion beyond anything other than an opinion. Jack Phillips, wireless operator for the Titanic. Brave, heroic guy who we all know did his duty sending distress messages to the last possible second, even after he was dismissed by Captain Smith from his post and told to take care of himself, continued to try to send rescue SOS messages. This is all we know from Harold Bride, the other Marconi operator who did survive. But anyway, Phillips, God bless him. They had received a bunch of ice warnings that day. 6 or 7 that day. I could look it up, but we all know they received multiple warnings. And we also know Second Officer Lightoller said in his account afterwards, I think it was recorded for the BBC or something, it's on YouTube, you can hear it, indirectly blamed Phillips, while still cutting him some slack, saying, the final ice message from the Masaba, which I forget the exact time, came through when Lightoller was on duty, and his quote was something like, if I had known perfectly well what I should have done had that Masaba message come to my hand. Without a shadow of doubt, I would have slowed her down immediately and sent for the captain. Something like that is pretty close to his quote. Thereby pinning it on Jack Phillips, saying if I didn't get that last Masaba message, or if I had got that last Masaba message, that made the big difference, and that would have solved everything. I was on charge, Lightoller, and I would have definitely saved the day. And in defense of Phillips, they had received 6 or 7 messages about ice that day, so he had to have known that they had known about it. Also, again, technical matter, the Marconi messages, if it was an official message for navigation purposes or something that had to be delivered to Captain Smith, it would be preceded with the prefix MSG, Master's Service Gram, I believe. So if this message had come through with this prefix, MSG, warning, Masaba telling you there's ice, Phillips and Bride would have been obligated to take it to Captain Smith. But since it didn't have that, I guess they weren't obligated. And I don't know, Phillips, everyone knows that they had a huge backlog of Marconi messages to send. And he might have just not thought anything of not sending the message. So, or delivering that Masaba message to the bridge. So, I don't know to what degree we could blame him, but Lightoller blamed him indirectly, almost completely. Next candidate off the top of my head here is Officer Murdoch, First Officer Murdoch. Again, nobody wanted the Titanic to strike an iceberg. Nobody wanted to die or have people die in the middle of the ocean, freezing at night. I feel sorry for everyone involved. So, I'm not trying to blame Officer Murdoch. But I'm trying to find, hypothetically, who are the people who we could say are the most to blame, if you had to. And Officer Murdoch's mistake, if you want to call it that, was when they saw the iceberg, he ordered the ship to turn to the left, to the port. We all know, most of us should know the hard to starboard and the confusion to someone who's not acquainted what that really means. But he turned the ship to the left to avoid the iceberg. And who would fault him for that? But I guess the real mistake he made was stopping and reversing the engines. If he really did reverse the engines, I guess there's some controversy if they were actually engaged into reverse. I always thought that they were, but I understand there's some controversy about it. But I'm not a navigation or naval expert, but I understand the way a ship turns is water passing through the rudder. And the faster you're moving, the faster water passes over your rudder, and the faster you turn. So by stopping the engines, or even worse, reversing the engines, Murdoch reduced the turning ability of the Titanic. Was it to such a degree that it would have made a difference in saving the ship? Who can say? Who can say? Everyone says it just glanced along the starboard side of the ship. The iceberg was just a glancing blow, so maybe a few extra seconds would have made the difference, but many of us Titanic enthusiasts know there was what they call grounding damage to the... I have my Titanic model here, folks. Again, going with a low-tech approach here, but I do have this. I have the models on order from Titanic Honor and Glory, by the way. Their whole set. I suggest everyone get a hold of those. They'll be part of the show soon, but I do have my model here for low-tech reference. But getting back to Murdoch, I understand if you wanted to be critical of Murdoch, that's like a basic choke, basic seamanship mistake, and it's unfortunate that he made it. Like as I was saying about, I got distracted about the grounding damage. Would it have made a difference if they turned 5 seconds earlier, 10 seconds earlier? Who knows? They were probably considerably grounded. We know that they were grounded from some of the reports of the engineering staff or whoever who saw water rising from underneath the floor plates, not from the forward bow pouring over, but underneath, in addition to the water coming from the forward portion. I think it was Frederick Barrett, I believe. I have to go over my notes. But, again, God love poor Murdoch. He is our second candidate for person most to blame. One person who is not to blame, in my opinion, is Bruce Ismay. I will be talking about Mr. Ismay from time to time, and I'm just going to say, please don't be upset, folks, if you're only familiar with him from the movies. I think he got a bit of a bum deal. The Titanic is an incredible story, incredible drama, one of the most incredible true stories in history of the planet. And every great story needs villains. And, if you want to criticize Ismay for getting in the lifeboat when there was other people who were going to die, I guess you can criticize him for that. I mean, for not sacrificing his life. If I was attorney for his defense, I would say there was room in the boat, was being lowered. He was right there. I believe that's what Lord Mersey said. He specified, he called some attention to the Duff Gordons and to Mr. Ismay to their conduct, specifically to clear them of any misdeeds or wrongdoings in getting the lifeboats that they did. But I think much of the bad things that we've heard about Bruce Ismay over the years, through all the movies and documentaries, are hyped up a little bit. I mean, we want a bad guy who's a good bad guy, but the evil rich guy who owns the ship and who saves himself, and that does sting. I mean, I'm going to do an episode on Bruce Ismay's point of view on things, but imagine you're Ismay and you know that there's ice, and then the captain knows there's ice. You have total faith in Captain Smith. Ismay had an iceberg warning handed to him from Captain Smith. I believe he showed Mrs. Ryerson earlier in the day and had informed her about it. Ismay did that there was icebergs about, and he said, if I understand it correctly, she had said, I guess that means we'll slow down. And he said, oh no, we're going to speed up and get out of the ice as fast as possible. Something like that. Maybe it's something they did, when the weather was clear. Right? Yeah, I think that was the idea, was, the weather was clear. You wanted to get through that ice before any kind of fog would set in. And that was standard practice, I guess. But imagine you're Ismay, you're in your bunk in the middle of the night, your new, $10 million then, $100 million ship. I know he wasn't technically the owner anymore. It was the IMM, International Mercantile Marine, owned by J.P. Morgan. I think many Titanic buffs know that. But again, he was representing the owner. He was president of the White Star Line. But anyway, you're in your cabin, you're sleeping, everything's going great, your nice new ship's going well. You have like the highest paid captain who's supposed to be managing everything for you. They know there's problems, he's supposed to have everything under control. And they wake you up in the middle of the night and say, okay, wake up. 1,000 people or more are going to die. You're probably going to die. We're all going to die. Sorry, we made a mistake. I don't know. I'd be pissed off if I was Ismay. You know what I mean? Like, I would have gotten a lifeboat and maybe yelled at them before I went. But again, I do. You want to do a whole episode on Ismay and really try to cut him some slack, because I feel he's got a bit of a bum deal. Again, he's not any kind of saint. He definitely, could have and should have. I don't know if he could have done any more. But I mean, just to stay there and die for no reason, I don't think would have made any difference. So Ismay is definitely not going to be in my list of most responsible people. Okay, and another person who's obviously not responsible for the Titanic disaster, because he wasn't even on the Titanic, but who got a bit of a bum deal and is not as to blame exactly as history would portray him, is Captain Lord of the Californian. Again, here in Titanic Discussions, we're going to assume that you're, at least somewhat familiar with the Titanic and the general facts, but no matter what, anytime we talk about anything, we will try to do a quick, reintroduction of who and what that person is, in case there's somebody who's unfamiliar with them. Okay, so the Californian was a ship that was, within sight of the rockets of the Titanic, the distress rockets of the Titanic at the very least. We'll have to do a whole episode on the Californian, of course, many episodes on the Californian and the mystery ship that's, the Titanic saw, and that whole bit of controversy. But Captain Lord of the Californian is, definitely not anybody's vote for greatest captain of the earliest 20th century. He did get a bit of a bum rap, though, if for no other reason. There was no way the Californian could have got to the Titanic, scene of the Titanic sinking and disaster, in time to affect any type of significant difference. There's a fantastic article called Californian: A Reality Check. I believe it's written by, I can't remember exactly who it's written by, some of the Encyclopedia Titanic guys, I think, or perhaps Paul Lee. But it goes on to say, basically from the moment they sighted the first rocket, and they said, what the hell was that? They paid super close attention and saw a second rocket and said, oh my God, the first one might have been a shooting star, but that's definitely two. Wake up the captain. And they went out and dragged Captain Lord out of bed and immediately headed full blast towards that position. They would have got there at the earliest, 20 minutes before the Titanic sank. Or some short time before the Titanic sank. In a miracle situation to have even gotten there in time to even see any portion of the ship above water. And now, we all know what happened to the Titanic, from, let's say, James Cameron's movie, during its sinking and breakup. Of course, it's not 100% perfect and right, but when it broke in two, it was also almost certainly boiler explosions from at least some of them. I believe on the ocean floor there's imploded boilers that you can see are clearly imploded from cold water. And thrown debris for a long time. Basically, if you were in the captain of the Californian and you pulled up to the sinking Titanic, you're not going to pull up alongside, throw a rope over and say, come on everybody, hop over. You'd be foolish to get anywhere near it. I believe in one of the, many years ago I saw Captain Michael Standard, something like that, as a commenter on the Encyclopedia Titanic, who I believe he was a long-time ship captain, and said, I wouldn't pull my ship within a mile of the sinking Titanic. So the most Captain Lord could have done, if he had been James Bond, more or less, would have been to pull the Californian within a mile or so of the sinking Titanic, and as soon as it went under, pulled his ship in as close as he can with ropes and nets over the side and launch all of his lifeboats, which, again, I forget the breakdown of the crew on the Californian, but it was something like a grand total of 50 crew members, 54, something like that on the, I'm not going to worry about getting stuff 100% precise, unless I'm making the point that, I looked it up and this one's 100% precise. So, I'll always be sure to make that distinction. In general, I want to try to give the gist of the idea. But like I said, the number of crew on the Californian, it was in this fantastic article, Californian: A Reality Check. Basically there would have been like 6 guys to run the engines and shovel coal. 3 people on the bridge, 2 persons in every lifeboat, or 3 or 4, and like 2 people to lower the lifeboats. It was like absurd, and there was again no real way they could affect any kind of major difference in the loss of life, not significantly, and all the criticism heaped upon him was partially, to a degree, an attempt to distract blame from the Board of Trade, who let the ship sail without sufficient lifeboats. Another episode I want to do is something that the Titanic Honor and Glory guys mentioned, is that you don't like to say this because people, more lifeboats probably would not have helped the Titanic significantly. The wonderful Eva Hart, one of the most prominent survivors who would speak throughout all the years on TV interviews and documentaries and such, always lamented publicly the fact that there was not enough lifeboats, and said if there was, everyone would have been saved. And unfortunately, I don't think that's true. I'm sad to say. I'm a lot more people would have been saved. Maybe things would have gone a lot better and all that. But as we all know, again, if you're a moderate Titanic buff, you know that the last two lifeboats, the collapsible boats, stored up in the front of the officers' quarters, right here, were kind of just decorations, and had to be lowered to the down to the davits by hand, or manhandled, and one went down it was a collapsible B went down sideways, and collapsible A went down in such a way they were never able to get the sides up. I looked up Engelhard collapsible boats on Google Images and actually saw like what one's supposed to be. It's actually pretty interesting, folks. I would recommend checking that out. Like I said, in the Titanic discussions, we're going to go with the lower tech stuff, folks, with the actual physical model, and we got the Stower's Titanic painting behind me. Some of you guys are really fantastic with your animations, and Titanic Honor and Glory guys. Again, I'm going to do an episode on the eras, or I guess you would say eras of Titanic knowledge and Titanic history. There was the initial era where it happened, and it was kind of forgotten about after World War I, and then World War II, and basically there was that whole era, like the initial era from when it happened until Walter Lord's Night to Remember in the 50s, and the movies after that, and a kind of a lull, with the occasional SOS Titanic or thing here or there, and then Cameron's movie in '97 started a total new era. Well, of course, I bypassed Dr. Ballard's Discovery in September of 1985. That started a new era, a huge new era. That was the era that started after Walter Lord. We went from Walter Lord's era, and A Night to Remember era, to Dr. Ballard era, to the James Cameron era, and now basically to the YouTube era of Titanic knowledge and history. And this is the best era. This is the best. Like I said, the real-time syncing animations, again, the Titanic Honor and Glory have done, and some other people. That's something I've wanted to see my entire life. Something like that. Since I was 4 years old. I said like that. A fundamental thing I forgot to mention, and I'm glad I'm getting it here in episode 1 in the introduction, is we constantly, with every episode, are going to remember the people who lost their lives on April 14th/15th, 1912. They lost their lives in a really unpleasant way when they weren't expecting it. Many of them thought they were like on their way to like a great new life. Things are going to be great, and they're going to like really improve things and send money back home to their families, and improve their lives. And instead, you die a scary, painful, agonizing death. You know what I mean? Lingering, scary death. So, again, for all the people who passed away in the Titanic, we will always remember you and commemorate you and have sympathy and I know it was a long time ago, and everyone who was on the Titanic is in the same place now. But again, that was a bad deal you folks got, and I will always, and we here at Titanic Discussions will always do our best to not forget you when discussing this incredible historical event, because that's what it was really all about. Okay, folks, so I think we'll probably wrap it up here for episode 1. I'm going to be varying lengths. I have no problem with doing a 3 or 4 hour Titanic discussion if, that's the way things play out. But for episode 1, we'll wrap it up here with just a quick recap. Again, person most responsible, as a legal matter, it's Captain Smith. Here in the United States, folks, there's a rule in traffic accidents, in minor traffic accidents, and it's this. It's if you're following behind another car and that guy slams on the brakes for no apparent reason, maybe he spilled coffee on his lap, and he slams on his brakes in the middle of the road and you hit him, you just bump into the back of him and damage your car slightly, you are responsible for hitting the guy who stopped. Even though he stopped in the middle of the road because he spilled coffee on his lap like a complete idiot, you're responsible because you hit him in the back and you weren't far enough away anticipating that he might be an idiot spilling coffee on his lap. It's your fault for hitting him in the back of his car with the front of your car, even though he's an idiot and stopped in the middle of the road. It's your fault. Cut and dry, legal matter. And like I said, unfortunately for Captain Smith, that's what it is for him. It's a legal matter, and he's responsible for the sinking of the Titanic, unfortunately. So, but apart from him, if I had to actually answer the question, I'm going to answer it for you, folks. And it's no one's fault. It's not even Captain Smith's fault, really. It was just this massive series of circumstances and prior experiences having vindicated the way people were acting. But I'm very sorry to say Officer Murdoch should have just turned to the port, should have just made the left and not reversed the engines. And if you had to blame one person the most for the striking of the iceberg and the sinking of the Titanic, unfortunately it's him. I mean, Frederick Fleet, I could have included a segment on him. Also, before I forget, there was no, if you're a serious Titanic buff or even a modern Titanic buff, you might know that the crow's nest guys, the lookouts, did not have binoculars. There was an officer, I believe his name is David Blair, who was supposed to be on the Titanic. He left at the last second to get switched to another ship, and he took the keys to the cabinet that had the lookouts' binoculars in them. So, like, when the lookouts asked Lightoller or somebody for our binoculars, he said, "You don't get any of this trip." So, and I have to say, I'm sure the guys on the bridge, the officers, had more than one pair of binoculars. And if there was absolutely nothing for the guys in the crow's nest because of this missing key, maybe they could have spared one pair for those guys, I mean, maybe they didn't have them, but I would think that they would have. It almost makes me seem like the officers are like, well, we're officers, and we're not going to lend our binoculars to you lowly, lookout crewmen. So, like, was it Lightoller's fault for not giving those guys binoculars? There's people are testifying that binoculars aren't any better for seeing objects at night. You see the object with your eye, and then when you see something, you break out the binoculars to see what it was. But Frederick Fleet himself said, in his tortured testimonies, they finally dragged out of him that if he, had binoculars, he would have had enough time to see it, or something like. He would have had enough time to get out of the way. So that was from Fleet's opinion, that if he had them, he would have been okay. So you could say it's Lightoller's fault for not taking whatever steps were necessary to get a pair of binoculars to those guys. Maybe not the lookouts binoculars, but take one of the officers' binoculars and give them to the guys in the crow's nest for the good of everyone on board the ship. So, that's another possibility. And I'm sure there's other ones that will occur to me, and we'll include them in other episodes. But like I said, I really want to get the Titanic Discussions webpage going. And, now is as good a time as any with everybody, especially my friends in the UK. Love you guys stuck in the house there. I hope you enjoy. Please like and subscribe like everybody says. And, hold on one second. Here at the Shack of Knowledge, we get by completely on donations. So I just figured I would check the cupboard here. Now we've got a dozen eggs and 2 granola bars that I got from somebody. So we're okay for a few days. But if you possibly could, by any chance, donate a one-time $1 or $2 PayPal donation, or a $1 or $2 for our Patreon when we get all that going. So I'm not sure if that'll be up by the time this video goes, because I really want to get the video going. I can get that later, and I have a dozen eggs to last me for a few days. But the time's going to come, folks, where I will ask for you to contribute what you can here at the Shack of Knowledge, so that we could just have enough to get a few eggs and oatmeal and get cornflakes and whatnot, and continue our quest for knowledge of the Titanic. We also are going to do extra episodes on the incredible history of airships. Obviously, the Hindenburg is such an, it just blows my mind, every aspect of lighter than aircraft. Again, they operated those ships filled with hydrogen. It blows my mind. It blows my mind that it was ever a thing. And there's some incredible historical episodes that I've learned about that I'll share with you, and maybe you've heard of them, maybe you know more about them than me. And also, I'm so glad I remember this. Please, any suggestion for a topic related to the Titanic, or any historical event similar, but primarily the Titanic, any topic you can think of, no matter how outlandish, far-fetched, anything, please put it in suggestions, and when I can, we will do an episode on it. One of our charter principles here is answering a question my good friend Randy asked me about 10 years ago. At that point, I had been a Titanic enthusiast, 35, 36, 37 years, and he moved to another state, so I hadn't seen him too often, and I bumped into him, or he came in for a visit, so I was, talking with him, this is 10 years ago, and I don't know, I was telling him something about the Titanic, and he said to me, Armin, how could you still have interest in the Titanic? Haven't you learned everything you could possibly know about it? What could still be interesting to you after 30 years? So I just briefly at the time, I told him, I said, Randy, I find out new things all the time. I find out new things about the Titanic all the time. But it is my quest to answer his question for the rest of my life, in that I'll never be satisfied with Titanic information. I'll never watch enough Titanic documentaries or movies, and that's why I wanted to get a real good discussion page for all of us who are interested and always have been. And again, with our guiding principle is to remember the poor people who passed away in that unfortunate night, in really unpleasant circumstances, and we have to pay some tribute to them. And again, there's still lessons from the Titanic today. There really is. Can't get into that right now, but there's lessons that are incredible relevance for today. I won't even get into the Corona stuff that's going on right now, but I want to thank you very much for tuning in. And like I said, we're going to have episodes as often as we possibly can. The more you can donate here to the Shack of Knowledge, the more eggs and oatmeal I can get. I promise, folks, I will sit here in the Shack of Knowledge and absorb as much as I can and share it with you and discuss it with you for as much as anybody cares to. So, and hopefully we'll have some live discussions too at some point. And again, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.